I used to believe that the most peaceful sound in the world was the wind passing through the tall pines on the 5 acres I inherited from my father. That land had been in my family for 3 generations, untouched, quiet, sacred. After my retirement, it became my safe place. No traffic, no loud music, no drama. Just me, a small, modest home, and 5.1 acres of forest stretching behind me like a green ocean. I thought nothing and no one could disturb that peace. But then I met Cynthia Lockwood. Cynthia was the HOA president for our rural residential development, although there was nothing rural about the way she ran things. Polished nails, designer shoes, clipboard always under her arm. She acted more like a Fortune 500 CEO than someone volunteering to maintain neighborhood harmony. She gave that phrase a whole new meaning. Harmony, to her, meant everyone doing exactly what she wanted. But I didn't think much of it at first. I hadn't wanted to live in a community with an HOA, but the realtor convinced me it was light touch with minimal restrictions, and for a year, it almost seemed true. I waved at neighbors walking their dogs, I tended to my garden, I took long walks on my back acres. Nothing unusual, nothing stressful, peaceful, until I woke up one Thursday morning to find bright orange surveying flags lining the edge of my property. At first, I assumed the county was doing something nearby, maybe new utility lines or drainage work. But when I walked closer, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. The flags weren't just on the boundary line. They were inside my property. 10 feet inside, 20 in some places, curving in strange angles that made no logical sense. I walked farther down the line, counting stakes, noticing fresh spray paint on my trees. My trees. I moved through the brush until I reached the end of the flagged line and froze. A bright yellow wooden stake had been hammered into the ground with a plastic tag stapled to it. Approved construction zone. A construction? On my land? I pulled out my phone and walked back to my driveway. I called Cynthia, and she answered on the 3rd ring with her usual chipper voice. Well, good morning. Is everything all right? There are surveying flags all over my property, I said. Do you know anything about that? There was a pause. A short one, but long enough to tell me she knew more than she wanted to admit. Oh, that, she finally said. It's just some preliminary site work for the new community project. What project? Another tiny pause. The Community Enhancement Initiative. What enhancement requires surveying on my land? Her tone immediately shifted, polite to defensive. Nothing is final yet, so no need to get worked up. The HOA Architectural Committee approved early planning. If anything ever moves forward, you'll be notified. I didn't like the sound of that at all. Cynthia, this is my property. Yes, and the board is very aware, she said, her voice tightening. But we ask all residents to cooperate with improvements that benefit the whole community. You'll be included when the time is right. The time is right? Improvements? My land? I hung up with a knot in my stomach. Something was wrong. Very wrong. 2 days later, the sound of machinery woke me up. At first, I thought it was coming from the road. But as I walked outside, my heart slammed against my ribs. A bulldozer was tearing through my back acreage. I sprinted across the yard, slipping on damp grass, shouting over the growl of engines. Hey, stop! This is private property! The workers did stop, but only because the machine needed to reposition. A man in a reflective vest approached me, wiping sweat from his forehead. Ma'am, everything's permitted. We're cleared to begin foundation work today. What foundation? This is my land. He blinked, confused. We're building the estate home. The HOA president approved it, said the parcel belonged to the community trust. My breath caught. Community trust? There is no community trust. He shrugged. I just follow the plans. He walked to the back of his truck and pulled out a clipboard. I took the papers from his hand. My blood ran cold. There were floor plans, huge floor plans. A 3-story estate residence with a glass atrium, rooftop deck, guest house, 4-car garage, a mansion. The blueprint's parcel number was mine. My number, my lot, my land. No, I whispered, backing away. This is wrong. This is fraud. The worker took the plans back without argument. Take it up with the HOA. We're just the contractor. I stormed across the field to Cynthia's house. Her home sat at the top of a small hill, trimmed with imported shrubs and a fountain that had never been turned off even during drought restrictions. She opened the door with an overly sweet smile. "Well, hello. What brings you? Are you building something on my property?" Her smile didn't fade, but her eyes sharpened. "That land is part of a reallocated community parcel." "No, it isn't," I snapped. "It's mine. It's been mine since my father transferred it to me." "Actually," she said, crossing her arms, "records indicate there was a boundary confusion in your deed. The board has been examining it. We're simply proceeding based on the latest information." "What boundary confusion?" She gave an exaggerated sigh. "Look, this isn't personal. This estate home is going to raise everyone's property values. The community needs it. You'll understand when it's finished." "Finished?" "Cynthia, they're pouring a foundation." She shrugged as though we were discussing weather. "It's already been approved." "If you continue interfering, the HOA will have to issue fines." "Fines? I'm the one being trespassed on. You signed the covenants," she said coldly. "And the covenants allow the HOA to allocate community improvements. Let the process unfold." I stared at her in disbelief. "You can't just build a mansion on someone else's land." Cynthia smiled again, but there was nothing friendly about it. "Watch me." That night I barely slept. I sat at my dining table surrounded by old paperwork. My father's original plat map, the county's archived surveys, the notarized deed transfer. Everything was in order. The parcel lines were clear. There was no confusion. Cynthia was lying. But why? What did she gain from this? The answer came the next morning. I walked outside to confront the workers again, and froze. Steel beams were already going up. The mansion wasn't just planned. It was happening. Fast. Then I heard Cynthia's voice behind me. "Isn't it beautiful?" I turned. She stood with a group of HOA board members, all sipping iced coffees as if watching a show. "You're insane," I whispered. "No," she replied. "I'm ambitious. This development will be the crown jewel of our community. A flagship property." "It's my property," I screamed. One of the board members muttered, "Not anymore." Panic surged inside me. "I'll call the sheriff." Cynthia laughed. "Go ahead. The county already approved it." "County approval? Since when? How?" She must have falsified something. There was no other explanation. I stepped away from her, pulled out my phone, and called the sheriff's office. When they arrived an hour later, I explained everything. The deputy inspected the property line, looked at the construction site, and studied the documents the foreman had. Then he frowned. "Ma'am, according to the documents submitted to the county, this land was reclassified into the community parcel. This construction is legal." I felt my knees weaken. "That's impossible." "You can appeal it with the county clerk's office," he said. "But as of now, I can't shut this project down." Cynthia beamed like a child who'd just won a contest. I walked back to my house with shaking hands, feeling powerless, violated, trapped. How had she done this? How had she convinced the county the land wasn't mine? The answer came 3 days later when I walked into the county records office. The clerk printed the updated parcel records for me, and the moment I saw them, everything clicked. The boundaries on the map had been altered. A line was shifted, incorrectly and illegally, cutting off nearly 2 acres of my land and labeling it Parcel CT3 Community Trust. My signature was on the form, except I had never signed it. The clerk looked apologetic. "If you're saying this is fraud, you need to file a formal dispute. But it can take months to resolve." "Months?" I whispered. "They're already building a mansion." "I'm sorry," she said, "but we can't halt construction until a judge issues an injunction. A judge, lawyers, court." This was spiraling fast. When I drove home, the mansion's frame had already reached the 2nd story. The noise, the workers, the trucks, it all felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I started filming everything, taking pictures, recording conversations, documenting every single moment. Because I knew one thing, Cynthia had forged something, and I was going to find out exactly what. The next morning, I found an envelope taped to my door, an HOA violation notice, actually 3 notices, all for made-up infractions: obstructing community development, unauthorized interference, failure to maintain yard aesthetics. Cynthia was retaliating. And that's when I realized this wasn't about the community. Cynthia was building the mansion for herself. I watched her the following week, taking private tours of the construction site, talking with designers, picking paint colors, choosing fixtures. She wasn't building a community enhancement. She was building her dream home on my land. And every time she saw me watching, she smiled. A slow, satisfied smile that said, "You can't stop me." But she was wrong. Because what she didn't know was that I had already made an appointment with a lawyer, one who specialized in land disputes. And once he saw what Cynthia had done, he said something I'll never forget. "She may have built a mansion on your property, but by the time this is over, that mansion might legally belong to you." The attorney I met with was named Daniel Reeves, a calm, analytical man who had the kind of confidence you only get from 30 years of battling bureaucratic disasters. After I spread every document onto his polished wood table, maps, surveys, screenshots, HOA notices, photos of the construction, he studied them in silence. Then he nodded slowly. "This is a classic case of fraudulent reclassification," he said. "The parcel boundary shift was filed without proper verification. And that signature? That's not yours." "No," I whispered. "She forged it." He tapped the page with a pen. "Or had someone forge it. The good news is, forged land documents unravel fast. The bad news, it takes time, and they've already built, what, half of the structure?" "2 floors," I said. "Maybe more by now." He leaned back in his chair. "Then we need to move quickly. I'll begin the injunction process today, but be warned, Cynthia will escalate. People who manipulate HOAs rarely go down quietly." He was right, because the moment Cynthia suspected I'd hired a lawyer, she unleashed an entire storm. By the following week, I had received 12 new violation notices, a letter threatening lien placement, an email warning of HOA disciplinary hearings, a $1,500 fine for obstructing community development. All bogus, all intimidation, and every day the mansion grew taller, bigger, more elaborate. Massive glass windows, imported stone, an infinity balcony overlooking my woods. I watched workers install custom doors, marble flooring, and an elevator shaft. An elevator, in a house never meant to exist. It was sickening. One afternoon, I walked out with my phone recording and confronted Cynthia directly as she strutted across the property in heels unsuited for construction sites. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. She pivoted, her ponytail swishing. "Because it's what the community needs." "No," I said, "it's what you want." She stepped closer. "You don't understand what this development could be worth. A flagship property increases equity across the neighborhood. Higher equity brings better buyers. Better buyers bring growth." "You mean money," I said. She didn't deny it. "You should be grateful. Your property value will skyrocket because of this." "It's my land," I snapped. "And you're stealing it." Cynthia's smile faded. Not fully, but enough for the truth to slip through the cracks. "Stealing?" she said quietly. "If you couldn't protect it, then you didn't deserve it in the first place." Those words chilled me. Protect it. Deserve it. She didn't just want the land. She believed she was entitled to it. But she wasn't the only one watching closely. In the days that followed, more neighbors began approaching me quietly, at the mailbox, on evening walks, even pulling up beside me while I was gardening. "Cynthia's out of control. She fined us for having a slightly faded mailbox. She told us porch lights after 10 p.m. violate guidelines. She made my elderly father move his tool shed because it cluttered the community aesthetic. She raised fees without a vote. Every complaint was whispered, like they were afraid someone would hear. Cynthia had built an empire of fear, not community, and now she was building a literal empire. On my land. Daniel filed the injunction, but the earliest court date was 2 months away. 2 months. At the pace the mansion was rising, it would be finished by then. Cynthia knew this. She rushed her contractors, pushing 14-hour days, floodlights on at night, materials delivered non-stop. It felt deliberate, like she wanted the house complete before a judge could get involved. And then something happened that changed everything. A neighbor named Evelyn, quiet, older, always tending her roses, slipped an envelope into my hands one evening. "Don't tell anyone I gave you this," she whispered, "but you'll want to see it." Inside were copies of emails. Emails between Cynthia and a county inspector. Emails where Cynthia promised future considerations if he expedited parcel reclassification. Emails discussing demolition dates and construction predictions long before Cynthia had introduced the idea to the HOA board. Emails where she explicitly wrote, "Once the reallocation is finalized, the land will be under my purview for personal development. Fast-track the signature and I'll handle the board." Personal development. She admitted it. In writing, when Daniel saw the emails, he nearly jumped out of his chair. "This is evidence of intent," he said. "Not a mistake, not confusion, intentional fraud." But Cynthia was ahead of us too. The next morning I found a bright red notice on my front door. HOA emergency meeting. Possible removal of member for community disruption. I almost laughed. Removal? They wanted to kick me out for protecting my property? Still, I went. The meeting room was packed, and for once, people weren't looking at Cynthia with admiration. They looked nervous, uneasy. She stood at the front, dressed impeccably, tapping her clipboard on the podium. "Our community is under attack," she announced. "A resident is endangering our property values, spreading misinformation, and obstructing essential improvements." Obstructing. That's what she called stopping a mansion thief. She gestured toward me dramatically. "This resident has hired legal counsel against the HOA, threatening us with baseless accusations. If this continues, we will file a countersuit for defamation and loss of community revenue." People murmured. I stood, calmly, quietly, and I pulled out Evelyn's envelope. "Before you vote," I said, my voice steady, "you should see what your president has been doing in the dark." I handed the papers to the nearest board member. They skimmed the first page and went pale. Then another neighbor read one, then another. Whispers rippled through the room. Cynthia stepped forward. "Those documents are fake, complete fabrications." But someone spoke up from the back. "That's your email signature." Another voice. "You told us this house was for the community." Another, "Why does it say personal development on these?" Cynthia slammed her clipboard down. "This is taken out of context." But it was too late. The room was turning. People who had blindly followed her were beginning to question, to doubt, to see. She ended the meeting abruptly, ordering everyone out. But it didn't matter. The cracks were spreading. What happened next accelerated everything. 2 days later, a reporter knocked on my door. Her name was Janine Collins, from the Regional Investigative News Team. She'd received a tip, anonymous, about HOA corruption, forged documents, and illegal construction. I didn't have to guess who sent it. Evelyn always seemed quiet, but she wasn't weak. Janine interviewed me on camera, walking through the property, showing the flags, the forged papers, the towering mansion behind my home. Her team captured everything. The story aired that Saturday evening, and by Sunday morning the entire town was talking. Cars slowly passed by. People stopped and stared. A drone hovered above the mansion roof. And Cynthia? She went ballistic. She stormed onto my property that afternoon, ignoring the cameras set up by a second news crew now camping on the street. Her hair was frizzed, her makeup smeared, her voice raw with panic. "How dare you?" she shouted. "You made me look like a criminal." "You did that yourself," I said. "You have no idea what you've done," she said, breathing heavily. "You've just declared war on the HOA. You think you can win? I run this neighborhood. I control the fines, I control the board, I control the bylaws." "You don't control the law," I replied. Her eyes flickered, fear, then fury. "When I'm done with you," she hissed, "you won't have money left to fight this." It was a threat, a real one. But something in me hardened. "I'm not the one who forged county records," I said. "I'm not the one bribing inspectors." She stiffened. The contractors nearby paused, sensing the tension. "You have nothing," she said. "We'll see," I answered. "In court." True to her word, Cynthia escalated. In the next 3 weeks she flooded me with additional $5,200 in fines, threats of home foreclosure, a claim that my compost bin violated sanitation rules, a cease and desist letter accusing me of slander. Daniel handled most of it. filing responses, gathering witnesses, securing expert surveyors. Meanwhile, the mansion neared completion. Exterior finished, landscaping installed, high-end fixtures delivered. Every day, Cynthia walked the property like a queen inspecting her new kingdom. But while she was busy building, we were building something bigger, a case. Daniel subpoenaed the county inspector. His testimony was damning. He admitted Cynthia pressured him, claiming the community already agreed to the reallocation. Then a former board member came forward. "Cynthia runs the HOA like a private business," he said. "She makes decisions without votes, threatens anyone who questions her, and manipulates records." The story gained traction. More neighbors submitted affidavits describing intimidation, forced compliance, and selective harassment. Every accusation painted the same picture. Cynthia wasn't a president. She was a tyrant. The county launched its own investigation into the parcel reclassification. Rumors spread that charges could follow. And finally a date was set, the injunction hearing, where a judge would decide whether I or Cynthia had legal ownership rights, was scheduled for the first week of November. 2 months earlier, Cynthia would have walked into that courtroom untouchable. Now, she walked in cornered. On the morning of the hearing, as I stood outside the courthouse with Daniel, news cameras hovered nearby. People whispered. And there, stepping out of a black SUV in a perfectly pressed suit, was Cynthia. She didn't look confident anymore. She looked brittle. Her eyes flashed toward me as she walked past, chin lifted. "I hope you're ready to lose everything you own," she muttered. But I wasn't afraid, because for the first time since this nightmare began, I knew something she didn't. The law was on my side. And soon, the judge would be too. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Maybe it was the air conditioning, or maybe it was the weight of everything that had happened. Months of noise, stress, fines, threats, sleepless nights, and the towering mansion that loomed over my property like a reminder of how far Cynthia had pushed me. But now, finally, all of it came down to this room. Cynthia sat at the defendant's table in a pristine white blazer, her posture stiff, her knuckles gripping a gold pen. Her lawyer whispered urgently to her, but she wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed forward, jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Behind her, a few loyal HOA board members sat in a tight cluster, whispering nervously. I took my seat beside Daniel. He gave me a reassuring nod. "Just tell the truth," he said quietly. "The evidence speaks for itself." The judge entered, stern and unreadable. "We are here to determine legal ownership of the property and the structure erected upon it," he began. "Both parties claim rights to the land in question. We will review the documents and hear testimony." Cynthia's lawyer started strong, presenting their argument as if reciting from a well-rehearsed script. He talked about community benefit, parcel reclassification, confusion due to outdated records, and Cynthia's good faith belief that the land belonged to the community trust. But the judge wasn't smiling. He interrupted twice, first to question why the parcel boundaries had changed so suddenly, then to ask why the so-called community trust had no documented members besides the HOA president. Then came my turn. Daniel presented the original survey from decades ago, then the newer surveys I paid for, then the aerial maps with clear boundary overlays. The judge leaned forward, examining every page slowly, silently. Next came the forged reclassification document. Daniel held it up. "Your Honor, my client has never seen this form until 2 months ago. The signature is not hers. And the notary listed on the form retired 5 years before this was filed." The judge raised his eyebrows sharply. "Retired?" "Yes, Your Honor," Daniel said. "We have a sworn statement from the notary confirming this. His seal was copied without permission." Cynthia shifted in her seat. Her lawyer scribbled frantically on his legal pad. Then Daniel pulled out the emails, the ones Evelyn had given me. He walked them to the judge and waited. The judge read the first one, then the second, then the third. With each page his frown deepened. When he finished, he set the stack down very slowly. "These appear to show explicit intent to acquire land for personal use," he said, his voice flat, "and to influence a county official in the process." Cynthia's lawyer stood abruptly. "Your Honor, my client has never denied that she wanted to improve the community." The judge held up one hand. "I am capable of reading the emails myself. Sit down." A hush fell over the courtroom. Then came witness testimony. The county inspector, pale and sweating, admitted he fast-tracked the parcel change because Cynthia convinced him it was pre-approved by the board. He insisted he never received payment or bribes, but he looked uncomfortable as he spoke. Next came Evelyn. She walked slowly to the stand, clutching her purse. Her voice trembled at first but grew stronger as she told the judge how Cynthia manipulated documents, pressured neighbors, and misled the community about the mansion's purpose. "She told us it was a community center," Evelyn said, "but I saw her meeting with designers picking out gold fixtures and custom marble countertops. That wasn't for the community." Cynthia's jaw tightened, but she didn't look at Evelyn, not once. Then neighbor after neighbor testified. Some described intimidation, some described fines and threats. One man recounted being forced to repaint his house because Cynthia said the color was too cheerful for the community. Every story painted the same picture. Cynthia ruled through fear, not leadership. By the time I took the stand, the room was silent, heavy with everything that had been revealed. I explained how the land had been passed down from my father, how I discovered the flags, how the mansion rose day by day while I felt powerless to stop it. Finally, Daniel ended with a simple line, "Your Honor, they built a private mansion on my client's land, without permission, using forged documents. The law has only one remedy for such a violation." Cynthia's lawyer rose for his final argument. He tried desperately to spin the story, claiming misunderstandings, clerical errors, and overreactions. But his voice lacked conviction. Even he knew the case was slipping like sand between fingers. Then the judge spoke. His verdict was deliberate, measured, and devastating. For Cynthia, there is overwhelming evidence that the HOA president knowingly altered parcel boundaries without authorization, misrepresented the land's ownership to county officials, and used her position for personal gain. Cynthia's shoulders stiffened. The mansion was built on land that legally belongs to the plaintiff. Under state property law, the structure, constructed without the owner's permission, becomes the property of the landholder. Cynthia's lips parted. She shook her head slowly, like she didn't understand the words. "It is the ruling of this court," the judge continued, "that full ownership of the newly constructed residence is awarded to the plaintiff. Furthermore, the defendant is responsible for all legal fees incurred by the plaintiff in this dispute." The room erupted in soft gasps and whispers. Cynthia rose so quickly her chair toppled backward. "No," she said hoarsely, "that's impossible. That is my house." "It was built on stolen land," the judge replied firmly. "Therefore, it is no longer yours." She whispered again, then louder. "No, you can't take it from me." Her lawyer tried to steady her, but she jerked away. She staggered, clutching the edge of the table as her face drained of color. You can't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "It was supposed to be mine." Then her knees buckled. She collapsed to the floor in front of the courtroom table. Her lawyer knelt beside her, calling her name. A bailiff rushed over. Someone called for medical staff. But Cynthia didn't faint from illness or injury. She fainted because the one thing she thought she controlled, the prize she'd manipulated an entire community to obtain, had slipped from her hands, and now belonged to me. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They helped her up, pale and shaky, and escorted her out of the courtroom on trembling legs. As she passed me, she avoided my eyes. She looked small. Smaller than I'd ever seen her. When the courtroom finally cleared, Daniel turned to me and smiled. "It's over," he said. "You won." But it didn't feel like victory yet. Not really. Not until I stepped back onto my land later that afternoon. I walked across the yard, through the trees, and up to the towering mansion. My mansion now. The sun was setting behind it, casting long shadows over the brand new terrace. Workers had left the property, equipment was gone. For the first time since construction began, the site was quiet. I stepped inside. The air smelled like fresh paint and sawdust. Marble floors gleamed under the soft light filtering through tall windows. The staircase curved like a ribbon. The kitchen, gleaming with unused stainless steel, looked like something from a luxury magazine. I should have felt triumphant. But instead, I felt reflective. This wasn't a prize, it was a scar. A monument to everything Cynthia had done to take what wasn't hers. And yet, I also knew something else. What happened here could help people. The mansion was bigger than anything I needed. Too big for a single person. too extravagant for someone who preferred gardening and quiet mornings. But maybe it didn't have to be mine alone. 2 weeks later, I called a community meeting, not an HOA meeting, but a gathering for everyone who lived in the neighborhood. People arrived curious, cautious, hopeful. We stood inside the grand main hall of the mansion that had nearly torn the community apart. "I've been thinking a lot," I began, "about what this house represents, and I've decided something." People listened closely. "I'm not turning this into a private residence. I'm converting it into a community center. A real one." A soft murmur spread through the room. "This place will be used for gatherings, events, after-school programs, charity drives, workshops, anything that helps bring people together." Evelyn teared up. Someone began clapping. Then others joined. And soon the entire hall was filled with the sound of applause echoing off marble and glass. The next month, the HOA voted unanimously to remove every board member who enabled Cynthia. New leadership was elected, people who cared about fairness, transparency, and community. And Cynthia? She resigned in disgrace. Rumors said she sold her home and moved far away, hoping to outrun the scandal. But for the first time in a long time, things felt right again. The mansion, once a symbol of Cynthia's greed, became a hub of life, laughter, and connection. Children's voices echoed in the halls during weekend art classes. Families gathered for potlucks. Neighbors finally spoke to one another without fear. And on quiet mornings when I walked the property my father left me, I realized something. Justice hadn't just been served. The land had been reclaimed, the community had been reclaimed, and I, once just a quiet homeowner minding my own business, had stood up against someone who believed she was untouchable, and won. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because sometimes the right thing to do is simply not let someone take from you what they have no right to. And sometimes, when you fight for what's yours, you end up giving something even bigger back in return.